परमेश्वरः Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. To the great Guru, Dr. S Rao, we have gathered here to pay a tribute to one of the greatest of the Gurus in the post-independent India. It's indeed a pleasure to each and every one of you to see here. May I request Shri P.S. Rao to get on to the stage, please. Sandeep will welcome him, take him, and present a bouquet. He joined the police service in 1966. While in service, he held many positions covering various departments like the ACB, the Training, State Public Service Commission, CBI, and Tourism, where he made such a big mark for himself. He was awarded the Indian Police Medal in 1986 and the President's Police Medal in 1993. He retired as the Director General of Police of Andhra Pradesh, and he volunteered, more importantly, to teach the aspiring civil servants in the state of Andhra Pradesh, and a founder member of Hyderabad Study Circle. May I request Anjanaya Reddy Garu to get onto the stage, please. Sandeep to take him on. Please accompany, please take him there and give him a bouquet, please, Sandeep. Now we have a young person here, worked as Superintendent of Police in Adilabad, Srikakulam. Sir, please. Srikakulam and Prakasham districts. As DIG of the Visakhapatnam range. He later worked as Commissioner of Police, Visakhapatnam, Hyderabad, Director of APA, and was Vice Chairman and CEO of APSRTC. He worked as DG of CRPF and Chief of Sahasra Seema Bal, a recipient of the Indian Police Medal and the President's Police Medal. He is actively engaged even today as a speaker and as a resource person and at a number of training institutions. May I now request Shri M.V. Krishna Rao, any activity by lighting the lamp, Deepa Prajwalana as we call it. May I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly light the lamp after offering flowers to the great Guru, Dr. S. Rao. May I request Dr. Chandra to lead them in doing the various activities on the stage, please. Shuklam Bhararam Vishnum Shashivarnam Jadurбhujam Prasannavanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye. Incidentally, the traffic of Hyderabad has prevented a small little girl, 6-year-old girl. She was to come and sing this prayer song. Unfortunately, she got stuck in the traffic. She's not able to come, and probably the entire police force which is here might help us in getting her faster in the later years of time. Okay, thank you. May I request Dr. Chandra to say a few words, please?
Good evening and welcome to all the important people. I'm very happy to see all of you here because I have never seen many people here, even though I'm Rao's youngest brother through his students only. So in this way, I want to really celebrate his life through all of you and know more about him, what he is. Because Dr. Rao is always enigmatic to me, even though I'm his brother. Only thing I remember about Dr. Rao is always reading books. I remember that. And tap the change left over and all that. They're all very fond memories. And afterwards, when I came back to India in 1988, I had a little bit more interaction with him. But I was living in Kakinada and he was in Hyderabad. But he made sure to come to Kakinada every month and spend 1 week there. That's the only time I had interaction with him. And I'm very proud to be his brother, and I still miss him. But this event we are planning for several years to commemorate his life and celebrate his life through all his students. And luckily today it became a reality, and I'm very happy about it. I thank all of you for coming here, and we'll be in touch with all of you. And our plan is also keep continuing this every year. Please leave your names and numbers so that we can get in touch with as many students of Dr. Rao as possible. Thank you.
May I now request Shri P.S. Ramohan Rao Garu. Sorry, sir. May I now request Shri M.V. Krishna Rao Garu to say a few words, please.
సభకు నమస్కారం. I was quite surprised when I was asked to speak by Dr. Chandrasekhar about a week ago. I am not qualified, primarily because I was never a student of Dr. Rao. In fact, for that matter, I was never a student at any of the coaching institutions. While studying MA, due to a certain sense of insecurity, I applied for the post of probationary officer in State Bank of India while I was still in MA final year, got the job, joined it exactly a day after my last exam, and was therefore never unemployed in my life. While working in the State Bank of India, I found the labor unrest there a little irritating, and therefore I thought, why not I try to be a civil servant. So while working in the bank, it so happened that I was in the branch during the 1973 exams. So whenever there was an exam, I used to take a casual leave and take the exam. That's how I landed up in the Indian Police Service. But when I went to Missouri for the for the foundation course, I found almost 100 of his students there in the Indian Administrative Service and the Indian Police Service. That's the first time I came to know that there is a coaching institute called RAU's RAU study circle in probably in those days Connaught Place or somewhere. I don't know much about those days. I didn't know much about Delhi. So I thought he must be a very popular teacher. But years later, during my tenure as the Police Academy director between 1993 and 98, Dr. Rao shifted his residence to a piece of nice green plot next to our academy, and that's the time when Sri Anjaneyya Reddy Garu once said, "Have you met Dr. Rao?" I said, "No." Then he took me, and that's the only time I met him. We were there for about maybe 20 minutes. But after I realized what a pioneer he was in the field of coaching aspirants for civil services, and more importantly, as a direct teacher, he made tremendous impact on all his students. There is not one of them who would fail to recollect how effective, though he was not at all a loud speaker, I believe, but he would speak so clearly, and every word that he uttered would be etched in their minds. So this is the feedback I got, and he's a pioneer in the industry of coaching civil servants. He must have never realized that it would become a multi-billion-dollar industry. In the small stretch in Hyderabad city alone, I'm not talking about Delhi and other places, in the small stretch between Indira Park and RTC Crossroads, it's about a kilometer and a half, there are 28 civil services coaching institutions. And in addition to that, close by you have a Braintree, And in fact, I once saw a coaching institute started by a person. The only experience he had was in catering services. He was very good in supplying food for hostels. And he thought he should also have a civil services coaching institute. So in a way, it became an industry in which a lot of employment generation had taken place, and also a lot of investment had taken place. I'm sure some of you would have heard of academies like Unacademy, started by Roman Saini. Roman Saini was a medical doctor from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, a very brilliant person. He joined the IAS, worked for 2 years. Then he realized that there is more money outside IAS, legally, ethically, and therefore he became a teacher on the YouTube. And he used to take lessons to whoever would afford a small fees. He would charge hardly 2,000 rupees or so. Eventually, an investor from the United States of America bought his Unacademy for 400 crores. We have other institutions like Byju's. They coach many kinds of courses, including civil services. So the impact that he had, not only in the classroom, but in the field of civil services coaching, which of course has become an industry, something like the way there are so many IIT coaching institutions, and several people are surviving and thriving. Samadhi, I believe, Sri Chaitanya, Narayana, they pay more than 2 to 3 lakhs of rupees for their teachers. So be that as it may, I have to acknowledge that number one, he is an outstanding teacher, though I never had the good fortune of attending any of his classes. Secondly, he's a pioneer, a person who became a role model to those people who thought if there is one way of making some money by encashing on the aspirations of youngsters, and therefore start these civil services institutes. Having said that, I am really surprised that was he really born 100 years ago? I don't know. Was he born in 1923? Very close to it. Anyway, by the time I met him, he must have been about 83 or 84 years old, but reasonably fit and mentally very alert, mentally very, very alert. I'm happy to have associated myself with this function, though I'm not qualified, and I'm also very grateful to the organizers for having given me an opportunity to share a few thoughts. Thank you.
I now request Sri Anjaney Reddy Garu to say a few words, please.
How long?
Direct students, so
Direct time. Our old boss, Sri Ramohan Rao Garu, Sri Chandrasekhar, Krishna Rao, and all the friends who have come here. It is true, as Krishna Rao said, I knew perhaps Rao longer than many others who are here now. In fact, many of his students are already, most of them are retired, and many of them are dead also. C.S. Rao, one of our distinguished IAS officers, he was a student. Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Prasad, was a student. So many others in our state, in other states also. I would like to say a few things about Dr. Rao, which perhaps many people do not know. In fact, I am now venturing to write my memoirs, in which I devoted a chapter to him. I sent it to Chandrasekhar some time ago, because he himself didn't know many things about Dr. Rao. I can't do better than reading out a few things from the memoirs. Rau's IAS study circle it is still there. Somebody else is running it now. Rau's IAS study circle, it functioned from a single room, from one room in Palace Heights Hotel in Connaught Place. The room was at the end of the corridor and opened onto the terrace on the top floor. Apart from Rau, who was its director, there was only one other employee, a part-time stenographer, who also doubled as secretary of the institute. In other words, it was a one-man institution. Rau was a very remote person and would not meet all those who came to meet him. They should meet only the secretary and discuss the nitty-gritty. And the secretary would give them a booklet called Informa, which answered most of what we are these days calling, frequently asked questions. Frequently asked questions. Often the secretary was better dressed than Rau, and the new candidates mistook him for the boss. Because Rau always used to be in a t-shirt and shorts. If it was summer, he would wear shorts. If it was not summer, he would wear some cotton pant. The secretary used to have a tie like Krishna Rao. He was very well dressed with the tie and all those things. Many people mistook him for Dr. Rao. He would say, no, I am not Rao, somewhere else. He was a short man, dressed always in t-shirts and pants and shorts. A non-believer, he was a rebel given to unconventional views on life and people. He was stern, even peevish, and always on his guard. He would not allow anybody to become familiar with him. He ate little, smoked a lot, and seemed to live on tea and biscuits, much as Krishna Menon, whom he used to admire. But unlike Krishna Menon, he used to have a drink in the evening. Very rarely used to go out and eat. A connoisseur of food, whenever he would go out with one of his students or friends to eat, he would give elaborate instructions to the chef. On the rare occasions he went out to dine with his former students. He hardly ever referred to his personal life. In a lighter vein, he would say his ancestors were tribals. From the word-of-mouth accounts, Sankuratri Apparao, that was his name. Sankuratri Apparao, that was his given name. He was from Rajamandri and was surely not a tribal. The second among the 9 children of a railway station master. Is it true? 11 children of a railway station master. He went to Andhra University for his honors studies and later started working in Rajamandri College. While working there, he took this UPSC examination and qualified for one of the services. Being the kind of person he wasn't on the best of terms with the principal of the college. The principal, obviously a spiteful person, sent an unfavorable report to the government when they called for his remarks on Dr. Rao. Those days, these things used to matter. Now they don't matter. Even if you're an ex-Naxalite, you can still get into services. When they called for his assessment of Dr. Rao's suitability for services, principal sent an unfavorable report. This is what used to be talked about those days. I don't know how much of it is true, because he would never himself discuss this. And the government finally was not selected for the services for whatever the reasons. Pandangare. Deprived of his lifetime opportunity to join services, he quit his job, moved to Shimla, a hill town he was very fond of. While in Shimla, one does not know what he did there. He fell in love and married a lady, a Punjabi artist, fathered a son, and later separated, though not divorced, from her. He then moved to Delhi, avoided talking in Telugu, transformed himself into S RAU. S RAU, R-A-U, as Krishna Rao said, and set up Rau's IAS study circle, perhaps the first of its kind in Delhi. Struggled hard, single-handed, and made a success of it. This is briefly a story. Now, how we went about it, I would like to say a few words. Rao called his coaching, he never called it coaching as Krishna Rao is doing now. It was not a coaching institute. He always called it a guidance program. He abhorred the word training. He would never use the word training. He used to tell us training is for animals, not for human beings, like horses, dogs, and all that. Now, about the word training, the whole program was split into 12 sessions, spread over 3 or 4 months, with each session lasting 3 to 4 hours, or even longer at times. In the very first session, he would advise what books to read, what journals to read, and what newspapers to read, and what to avoid reading, what they should not read also, he used to say. Van Loon's The Story of Mankind, Panikar's Survey of India, Weber's Political Science. They were some of the books which he would always suggest. He would advise us to read only the Statesman, not Times of India, Hindustan Times, and that kind of thing. And its third editorial, there used to be 3 editorials. He would recommend you must read every day the third editorial, which was devoted to humor and sarcasm. Those days, civil services examination, essay writing, critical appreciation of a poem, and précis writing. These 3 were very important. In fact, most of his guidance was about these 3 aspects only. Rao taught his students the skills required in these areas and helped them to practice. He also gave a few general lectures on history, political science, and current affairs. In every session, he would question the students extensively on the contemporary events and help them to identify the core issues and suggested further reading. His emphasis was on comprehensive understanding of a theme, or a subject, so that you should be able to mold your answer according to the questions. You say you spend some time, understand the question first, and whatever material is at your disposal, you try to mold it according to the requirements of the question. At the end of these sessions, he would hold a few tests. He would not call them answer books, he would call them scripts. And he used to personally evaluate the scripts and counsel the students, made suggestions for improvement. And that was the end of the guidance program. These 12 sessions used to be almost like this only, all the 12 sessions. It is spread over 4 months or 3 months or 4 months. That was the end of the program. Rest of the work you have to do it yourself and go back to him whenever you are in need of any help. So this reminds me of a thing in Buddhism. So Buddha told his disciples, Tathagatas only show the way, It is for you to endeavor. You have to endeavor. Buddha is not going to take you to nirvana. He only shows the way. You have to endeavor. Rao also would say, this is the way. Now you should work hard. You should work hard and work your way up. For me, studies with Rao were of great help because I was a student of mathematics, not a very good one at that. So all my life I studied only mathematics, and finally I realized I was not good enough. I gave up mathematics and took to humanities. I took my IPS examination only in humanities. So that's why his instruction was very useful to me. There was no emphasis on skills of writing. None of my teachers ever spoke to us about them, let alone teach them. I learned them for the first time from Dr. Rao. He taught me how to introduce the theme of an essay. The theme of an essay, how to transcend from one paragraph to another, expounding an idea in each paragraph. One idea should be expounded in one paragraph, and you must transcend from one paragraph to another. How to do all that? How to take a balanced view of an issue by reconciling the conflicting opinions. There are conflicting opinions. He suggested that the same principles may be employed in answering questions in history and other humanities. Similarly, in précis writing, he would say, identify the core ideas in the theme. And in your condensed text, there should be reference to all those three or four core ideas. These ideas perhaps were familiar to students of literature and social sciences. For me, they were new and useful skills and helped me a great deal in transition from mathematics to social sciences. I wrote this exam only once. I took only one interview and did only one job, that was the IPS job. I didn't do any other job, like Krishna Rao was a lecturer, CS Rao was a lecturer, my friend Prasad was a lecturer. But I straight away I went to Dr. Rao because of Bhaskar Rao, his younger brother. We were colleagues in Sagar University. He used to do literature, I was in mathematics. So he suggested I should go to Delhi and try to do the civil services examination. He sent a letter to his brother and advised me to go to Delhi. Unfortunately, he is not with us today. He's passed away some time ago. He used to work for Air India, Bhaskar Rao. With some of the students, particularly those who liked, generally used to be a little quite formal with all others. With some of the students, he was quite relaxed. Even occasionally used to share a beer with them. His agnosticism and disapproval of sanctimony accorded with my own temperament. I was myself an agnostic those days, evolving into an atheist, which I am today. Under the influence of Periyar Ramaswamy Naikar of Dravida Gajagam and Gopa Ramachandra Rao, I consider him the greatest among the Telugu people, Goparaj Ramachandra Rao, Gora of Vijayawada. So my temperament suited Dr. Rao's ideas because he also had similar ideas. So after taking the civil service exam, I was back home in Nellore. I sent him a letter saying, whether I get through the exam or not. Now I'm quite confident. I can do anything else and go ahead. Dr. Rao used to say, if you don't get through the exam, I'll speak to someone and send you to Chalapati Rao of National Herald. You must go and work with Chalapati Rao. That's what he used to tell me. But I had no occasion because when I got into the IPS. And unfortunately, I never met Chalapati Rao also. Again, at the time of interview, all of us used to go back to Delhi. Then again, another five or six sessions with him. In the very first session, he would speak to us at length on the personality test and explain how it was different from the theoretical examination. He used to say, this doesn't aim at testing your theoretical knowledge because it has already been tested in theory papers, but meant to assess the potential of the candidate, whether he has the potential to grow into a good and useful civil servant and with the right attitude. And he would talk to a number of people, gather the trend of questioning from UPS and from people who have done the interviews. He would talk to them, find out what kind of questions are being asked and how it's going. And brief us. He used to give many suggestions in a series of model interviews. The candidate, we conduct model interviews now more or less on the same lines, Krishna Rao and I in Hyderabad Study Circle. They should be able to, he used to say the candidate should be able to impress the board that he is open-minded, he is aware of the happening around him, and he understands them in their totality. They should be able to suggest mature and not one-sided solutions. You are answering the questionnaire. You should be able to suggest a mature solution, not one-sided. They should give the impression of understanding the social problems with sympathy and should not give any knee-jerk reactions, smacking of prejudice. A candidate should say sorry if he did not know the answer and not try to guess or bluff through the interview. All these suggestions he used to tell us and used to prepare us for interviews. You should be mindful of small things like greeting the chairperson, waiting till he asks you to sit down. Don't go and sit down in the chair yourself. You wait till he asks you to sit down. And put the chair back in place after the interview and thank the chairperson. These small things, all these things he used to tell us. In short, in the short time at their disposal, the candidate should consciously acquire these attitudes and bear in mind that they were dealing with experienced civil servants, and so couch their answers in deferential language and should never argue with the members of the board. Rao also encouraged us to question one another on contemporaneous issues. Students among ourselves, whenever there's a break, you say, you talk to each other, you ask, question each other. So we had a good, interesting experience. One gentleman came. He was the second time he was qualified for IAS examination. I don't want to give his name. First year he got 22% in Viva. So second year he came to Dr. Rao. Dr. Rao said, this man has come from Andhra, he is new to Delhi, you put him up in your room and bring him along with you and you come to the study circle. He was with me. Every day we used to question each other. He was a man from biological sciences background. Then we were talking about Andhra University, asked him about the founder and the books written by the founder, his contribution, his place in politics, place in literature. This man knew nothing. So I briefed him. Fortunately for him, the next day the interview started with that only. Luckily for him. And he was, he could answer these questions easily, and then he was very confident, and the rest of the questions he could go through. And the next year he got 65% in the Viva, from 22 to 65, all because of this association with Dr. Rao. Same thing happened with me also. When I went to the interview, they asked me about the founder of Sagar University, because some of the members used to know him. Dr. Harsing Gaur. He was a very well-known man, and he was a member of the Constituent Assembly. He was knighted, he was Sir Harsing Gaur and all that. Not many people knew much about him. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because I was not good in mathematics, I used to go to the library and read this kind of books. So I read many of his books, including his autobiography called 7 Lives. So when they asked me about Harisankar Gaud, I reeled out more names of more books than the member knew. He was greatly impressed. He thought I was... and then, the interview went on very well. Among in our board, well-known people like Padurai was there, professor of political science, well-known Padurai. And he asked me about China and India. Rao used to gather this kind of information from other people interviewed and would tell us, this is how the interviews are going. You be prepared. We might ask you about this also, China war, India war and all that. You be prepared for that and gather all the information. Take a balanced view and try to... I won't take very long now, finish it now. Andhra Pradesh was doing very badly in civil services those days. So in our batch, though there were more than 1,000 people in the academy, there were only 12 people from Andhra, all the services put together. So we were somehow keen that we should request Dr. Rao to start Hyderabad, that Rao Study Circle in Hyderabad, at least a branch of it. So when I was working in CBI, I went back and met him and requested him to come and start a branch of the Rao Study Circle. For some reason, he was very reluctant. He was not at all interested, but finally, after great persuasion, he agreed. I would help you to start an institution of yours, an institute, but you do it yourself. It will not be Rao's institute, you do it yourself. That's how we started Hyderabad Study Circle 47 years ago. In 1976, we started. It's 47 years now. He was associated with us for 2 or 3 years. It is he who set the pattern. Panduranga Reddy was one of the history lecturers those days, and he was with Dr. Rao also. He is here. So he is also among us, one of the founders, Panduranga Reddy. So he is an ex-army officer. So he learned some of Dr. Rao's techniques and started his own institutions later. Anyway, that is how we started Hyderabad Study Circle. Today, Dr. Venugopal Reddy, me, and a few others. Today, we have more than 1,000 officers in various services, not only Class 1 services, but including Reserve Bank, State Bank, managing directors of State Bank. One managing director was from Hyderabad Study Circle. There were many, LIC. Now Airtel chief here is from Hyderabad Study Circle. His younger brother, Rama, has two sons, Sir IP Rama has 2 sons, Ramesh and Suresh. IP Rama was a police officer. He brought both his sons and said, these fellows are not doing anything, please put them inside his circle. I put both of them. Suresh became Chief Commissioner of Income Tax and retired. His older brother is now he was a chief of Airtel in Hyderabad. Like this, we have more than 1,000 people all over the country, from Manipur, Tripura to Kerala. This institution could stabilize because initially we associated Dr. Rao with it. His reputation, because of Dr. Rao's reputation, when we started, these people started coming in. After 2-3 years, it stabilized. A number of people started taking interest, and very eminent people came and taught there. And even today, it is still there. And all the people, as Krishna Rao said, there are some 32 institutions in Hyderabad. All these people at one point of time, either they were students of Hyderabad Study Circle or they worked in Hyderabad Study Circle as lecturers. So it has spawned many institutions. So we now feel a time has now come to wind it up. We intend winding it up when it completes 50 years. Another 2-3 years we'd like to wind it up because it has more than served its purpose. So that way also we are grateful to Dr. Rao for helping us to start this institution. Towards the end of his life, he came back and settled down here outside Hyderabad on the way to Himayat Saga. And then there he used to run this institute for some time. I don't know now what's happening to that. But Dr. Rau's institute in Delhi, it was, I think he gave it away to some people, and it is still running in his name, but it's not any longer a premier institute, which it used to be. Rau's institute, not only a very good institute, it was almost the first one in Delhi. Earlier there was something in Tamil Nadu called Iyer Institute or something, but in Delhi there was nothing. There was nothing in Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, all these cities. The first institution in Delhi was by Dr. Rau's. And his own sister-in-law, wife's younger sister, she also got a student of that and got into, she retired from Haryana cadre as chief secretary, and many people, from his wife's side also, they were there studying with us. And that is the remarkable service he did. And finally, Andhra University honored him with an honorary degree, honorary doctorate. That was towards the end of his life. He was honored, but I think he deserved much better recognition than that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that insight. May I now request Sri S RAU Memorial Lecture to address.
I'll sit and do that. I'm not. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I ask Panduranga Reddy to say a few? We'll request Mr. Panduranga Reddy work with Dr. Rau. Come say a few words. He also taught history. So he learned all the techniques and started his own soldier scholar study circle. You know the name. You know the name. Come. Huh? What that? 5 minutes మాట్లాడు.
Respected dignitaries, respected Anjana Reddy garu, respected RAU Memorial garu, His Excellency, and Krishna Rao garu, other dignitaries. Dr. Rao is an institution, not an individual. In fact, he was a man known for his erudition and scholarship. At the same time, he used to sit very lightly on his shoulders. He could make even ordinary fellow as a great intellectual. Dr. Anjana very clearly said, time and again he used to quote Confucius. If you are hungry, I can give fish 2 days, 3 days. Every time I can't give. But I will teach you how to catch. Exactly said. In fact, when he was telling, I thought that he was in Rau's class. I was his student. At the same time, I was his junior colleague also. And he used to make sit in the classroom and follow how to go about. Just now he made a mention of an excellent book, Story of Mankind by Van Loon. Even now it holds good, that book. Whether a student of history or not, that's immaterial. And interview techniques, excellent. That book one has to read even for understanding current affairs. The way the American foreign policy. Though I am a teacher, but I do not take much time out in that. Because very country born out of rebellion. Mayflower. That's why the foreign policy also swings from one end to another end. Britain, if you want to write the British history as one of the options, unless you know the very character of British, it's an island. Though it is a part of Europe, it is always kept aloof from European politics.
Like that small book in the interview, there is one book is there. Still, it's a must for any aspirant for Group 1 as well as civil service. You should read that chapter. Then only you can interpret questions very well. Thank you very much, sir, for giving this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir, for really chipping in with your thoughts and ideas. May I now request Shri Gopal Krishna Garu to say a few words? Okay. Okay. Anyone else who would like to say a few words, please? Anyone? Yes, sir. Come along.
No problem. Sir, namaskar. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vivek, one of the mentees of Dr. S RAU. I have a few reflections and some memories about Dr. RAU. Those were the days when we were aspiring to become public servants. And then the days were either you get a government job or you don't join government service, then you are treated as worthless. So late 70s and early 80s, that was the kind of society we had. Although coming as I do from a bureaucrat's family background, my father also said, why don't you give a try? Though I was into journalism and dabbling in journalism, you know, hopping from one newspaper to another newspaper and stuff. But then somehow I felt that I should also try this, and then it so happened that I ran into our Dr. Captain L. Pandangareddy garu, and then he said, here is one institution which is coming up, why don't you join? Then, of course, I didn't know much about Dr. S. RAU himself. I also didn't know much about what IAS is all about, but except hearing from my father that, you know, there will be some person like collector, and, you know, he was sharing some anecdotes. And those days, when he served as a RDO and Tahsildar and all that, he used to talk about some collectors like, so he said, why don't you just try? And then around that time, this Hyderabad study circle came up. And then in the very first session, as Sir Dr. our Anjaney Reddy garu has rightly said, he would only talk about what to read and what not to read. And then I had the benefit of, you know, writing articles for newspapers at that time, though not very frequently, but then there was a test, and then in that test, of course, sir was also there on the interview panel. Then he took me into the study circle. See, why I had to tell you all this is because for someone who didn't know anything about IAS, and then we thought, you know, getting gold medals and excellent marks in academic exams itself was a test of one's, you know, intellectual abilities. But then it so happened that the moment we joined study circle, we felt that we were literally zero. So all our academic knowledge was probably, you know, it only helped us get good degrees and good percentages and all that. So the beauty of Dr. Rau's guidance was that he was able to help us see a kind of, you know, connection between seemingly unconnected things. So that is the kind of insight one gets when you go through, you know, a guidance program such as the one given by Dr. S. RAU. Otherwise, typically in a university kind of education, one would only read, memorize and reproduce. And then that critical element called that insight and that ability to connect, seemingly disparate set of facts and all that was somehow missing in typical academic, education. So that, in a way, has helped me a lot, and of course, also it helped me refine my writing abilities as well. How to write straight, simple, in a direct manner, and crisp. And in so many ways, I think it's more or less, it's apart from cracking exams, I think the way he approached any topic or subject was more like, in real terms, education. So looking back, I feel I was really fortunate to have been a member of his guidance program. And subsequently, I haven't really come across, of course, later on I studied on my own and cracked some other competitive exam. But then I really don't come across many such mentors these days. Probably because even the nature of the exam also may have undergone a lot of change. But it looks like these days it's more of, vastness and more of memory and reproduction, rather than insightful and critical analysis. Nevertheless, on this occasion, I am thankful to the organizers here for giving me this opportunity to share a few reflections about Dr. S RAU. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. May I now request P.S. Ramon Ragaru to talk about him.
Not very comfortable with this hand microphone. Anyway. No, because you can't hold it steadily. Anyway, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. No, there are advantages and disadvantages of being the last speaker. But I've been too long accustomed to being the last speaker. I thought I would speak at the end after my other colleagues have spoken. Going through looking at the proceedings that have gone by, it looks as though I'm the odd man out. Because all the speakers before me, Anjaneya went through you may not call it a coaching institute, a guidance program. And he elaborately explained his experiences with Dr. Rao. In fact, I would consider it a very genuine and heartfelt and at the same time very insightful tribute to a man who really made history in his sphere of activity, that is Dr. Rao. And Krishna Rao, though he didn't go through any coaching institute, he is now a formidable teacher himself, a Vadyar by any standard. So many teaching, so many institutions he teaches. For he is a versatile teacher himself. And the other speakers are also closely associated with teaching. And I am the only person who hasn't done any kind of teaching at all. In fact, I didn't also go through any institute when I wrote the civil services examination. I also wrote only once and passed in the very first attempt. I didn't have to write a second time. Though a lot of my friends and other well-wishers insisted that I should appear again because I entered the Indian Police Service on my first attempt. And they said, no, you must have a crack at the IAS for write again. So I didn't do that. Looking back, I don't think I missed anything by not writing again and qualifying for the IAS. Now, I belong to more or less the first generation of civil servants, in a manner of speaking, because I belong to the 9th regulars, that is the 9th examination after independence, which I took and passed. And in those days, I studied in Presidency College, Madras, now Chennai, and I did physics. For in those days, there were only 2 institutions which either coached or gave guidance for the civil services examination. One was RAU's study circle, and the other, as Anjaney Reddy recalled, was the IS Institute in Madras. But all those who thought that they had a chance to pass the civil service examination considered it beneath themselves to go to a coaching institute. For the coaching institutes were looked down upon in those days. As I said, I also didn't get any coaching of any kind. Later, I happened to read on these coaching institutions. For I think the speakers before me have touched upon other aspects of guidance and coaching to these civil services examination. I would like to let you into a little history. 57, there was no competitive examination for the Indian civil service. In the beginning, when the East India Company ruled, they picked up some of those fellows whom they knew in their own families, in their friends' families. People who were not very good at studies and who were kind of nuisance to their parents. They picked up these guys and packed them off to India as what they call writers. You know, writers. Calcutta, the secretariat is called the Writers' Building even today. For these writers, all that they knew was a little account keeping, nothing more than that. Robert Clive himself was a writer who really laid the foundation for the British Empire in India. And Warren Hastings thereafter, and so many others. So these writers were all, it was a kind of a patriot, a sort of a family club. So you picked up some of your nephews and cousins and all who were not finding it very comfortable live in England, packed them off to become writers. They all later became civilians, collectors and district officers and what have you. Lord Wellesley, who was who became the Governor General at the turn of 19th century, I think he became the Governor General in 1899 and stayed on till 1904 or 1905. He found all these civilians not very useful and not trained at all. And therefore he thought that he should start a training college in Fort William to teach them Indian languages, a bit of Indian history, and a little of Sanskrit, a little of Arabic and Persian, so that he could prepare them to be more useful civilians in the districts. But Wellesley had a nasty habit of doing everything first and then reporting to his court of directors of the East India Company. For he used to irritate the directors in the court. For what they did was, when he reported to London that he had set up this Oriental College to train civilians in Fort William, they promptly asked him to stop it, because it entailed a lot of expenditure and the East India Company was not making profits at that point of time. But soon they realized the usefulness of training their civilians. For they started an institution in England itself, first in Hertford Castle, and within a few years after that, they built an exclusive training institution at a place called Hailbury. From about 1908 or 1909 till about, 1808 or 1809 till about 1858, Hailbury trained the Indian civilians. And there again, they had a limited competitive examination, limited to the candidates that the court of directors and the various lords and nobles sponsored. Again, it was a family club. So they sponsored about 100, 150 fellows, and they were put through a competitive test, and about 40 or 50 of them came out of the competitive test, and then they were trained in Hailbury. So after 1857, when the governance of India passed from the hands of the East India Company to the British Crown, they introduced the competitive examination, which was the foundation of the Indian civil service as we know it today. And this competition, I think the qualifications went through many changes over the period of time. But basically, the competition, this competitive examination, bypassed Oxford, Cambridge, the University of London, the University of Glasgow, the St. Andrews, all these established British institutions, because the syllabus for the competitive examination and the manner of testing the candidates, all this did not have any kind of relationship with what they taught in Oxford and Cambridge in the initial years. And therefore, they needed training institutions. And that is how training institutions for the civil service competitive examination in England started. And a number of institutions sprouted in London and in the neighborhood, just as we have, scores of institutions in India today. And the most famous of them was an institution called Wren and Gurney in London. And over time, these coaching institutions came to be called as crammers. That is where the candidates are put through a cramming examination, and then they pass the examination and enter the civil service. They were called the crammers. And there were many crammers in London and around, of which the most famous was this Wren and Gurney. Now the crammers produced their own kind of civilians, whom the Hailbury chaps who preceded them didn't like very much. And in fact, the Hailbury guys used to call the crammers as arrogant, conceited, and underbred. See, the Hailbury fellows all came from, the families of nobles and lords. So they found these guys who came through the crammers. They were very arrogant because they came through a civil service examination, but they were considered underbred. And even Matthew Arnold, Matthew Arnold, the poet, the English poet, he taught at Hailbury. And he also felt that these civilians who came through the civil service competitive examination, he, in his characteristic poetic language, he said they are crammed men, not formed men. The crammed men, not formed men. Therefore, but over a period of time, the British government and the Indian government, in India also found that these civilians who came through the examination though they might not be formed men, they may be crammed men, there were less of bad fellows, bad eggs. Hailberry produced a lot of bad eggs. And there were also less of geniuses, because the Hailberry guys liked the countryside, liked the outdoors, and the crammers liked the capitals, where you could lead a comfortable life. So anyway, this is history. This is the history behind the coaching institutions that were formed in India when the ICS and the Indian police, Imperial Police, gave way to the Indian Administrative Service, the Indian Police Service, and other related civil services and all that. So initially, we also looked down upon these teaching institutions, as I have said. To my knowledge, none of my generation, those who qualified for the IAS or the IPS or the central services, ever went through the IAS Institute or the RAU Study Circle in the initial years. Later, of course, RAU Study Circle produced them in copious numbers. Now, this is the background. And I didn't know Dr. Rao till I met him one day at a dinner. This was, I think, probably in the late 80s or early 80s in Hyderabad at some French place. I met him. And I was introduced to him and so and so. Then he went into his background. He didn't tell me that it was the antecedent verification which kept him out of the civil service. He said he qualified for the civil service examination but was not selected finally. I thought probably he got a low rank and did not make the grade. That was the impression I got. But he was a very interesting person. And the relevance of these study circles or coaching institutions, whichever way you may call them, has come to the fore in India also in a peculiar way. Now, in the civil service, ICS examination, in fact, the ICS was considered to be more coveted the home civil service. In fact, the more brilliant, the more adventurous preferred the ICS to the home civil service. Dalhousie, who was the last Governor General under the East India Company, Canning, who came next, he was not merely the Governor General, he also became the Viceroy, the first Viceroy. Dalhousie was an imperialist. In fact, the Sipahis' mutiny was largely due to Dalhousie's follies. Now, Dalhousie, you know what he said? He said a home civil service officer is at best a clerk in the secretariat. But an Indian civil service officer is a pro-consul. As a district officer, he had enormous influence, enormous power, and enormous capacity to change the course of lives of people for whom he worked. For Dalhousie described the district officers in the Indian civil service as pro-consuls. For with the result, over a period of time in the Indian civil service, in fact, I think around 1930 or 32, when they took a census, there were 1,174 Indian civil service officers at that time, of whom 600 came from Oxford and 300 came from Cambridge. And the remaining fellows came from Glasgow and Edinburgh and St. Andrews and Delhi, London School of Economics or the University of London. So the same thing happened in India also. In the initial years, the first 2 decades, for instance, I'll tell you, in my own year, my examination, I think there were 66 or 64 chaps who went into the foreign service and the administrative service. And out of the 64 who went into these two services, I think almost 20 belong to the Madras University. 1/3 of them. 8 of them in the IAS belong to the Presidency College. 7 of them belong to the Loyola College. And 2 or 3 to Christian College and another 2 or 3 to St. Joseph's, Trichy. In fact, Natarajan, my batchmate who was the chief secretary here, he came from St. Joseph's, Trichy. Dorasamy, who is also my batchmate, he came from Presidency. And like that, Krishnan, I think, Krishnan and Balakrishnan, my batchmates, they came from Loyola. For here within Andhra Pradesh Kada. For out of 64, 65, more than 20 fellows came from Madras University, and probably about 14, 15 came from Delhi, and out of them about 7 or 8 from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and another dozen or 15 from Allahabad. For 1 dozen, 15, 30, 20, the other 15 or 16 came from all the other universities in India. The reason being, these are the metropolitan cities. For the urban bred fellows, they were able to qualify in the civil service examination. And in my own case, I was a provincial and I fell ill. And I wrote my examination in that very severe health condition. With the result, I did not make it to engineering in Guindy. And I said I never liked engineering, therefore I said it was a blessing in disguise. I said, let me have a crack at the competitive examination. That's why I went to Presidency College. I did not go to Voltaire. Deliberately I went to Presidency College to measure myself against the big guys who came from Mylapore and Triplicane and studied in these, hallowed institutions of presidency and all that. And I did quite well. And with the result, they used to look down upon me, and they used to call me a hick. A hick is, one of those unbred, ill-bred fellow from one of the country towns like Vijayawada. For even in the Indian administrative service, foreign service and police service, the bulk of the candidates in the first 2 decades came from Madras, Delhi and Allahabad. Only the rest came from other places. So this is where the importance of coaching institutions arose. And even the pattern of the exams, the format of the examination itself was changed. People realized that they're not getting men from the small towns and the 2-tier cities and the 3-tier towns and all into the civil service. Therefore, they went into this and then changed the format of the examination, increase the number of chances that you could have a crack at the examination, etc., etc. And later now, they've liberalized it even more. And as a result of these coaching institutions like RAU Study Circle, now we find the Indian Administrative Service, the Police Service, all the other services having, I think, a larger number of people from the small towns and the rural background than those from the urban, the cities and the metropolises. And that is where the importance of the civil service arose. I mean, the coaching institutions and the guidance centers arose. And Anjaneya has a lot of experience with Hyderabad Study Circle. As he told you, he's got almost 1,000 fellows in sort of parked in various services and establishments. And RAU was indeed a pioneer, I would end my remarks with another observation. John Major, as you know, was the British Prime Minister who succeeded Margaret Thatcher. In one of his conversations, he said, he introspected. And he said, I was not a very brilliant student, for I had no way of cracking the Home Civil Service examination. But at the same time, I didn't want also to be a clerk, lower down in the hierarchy. For I pondered over it and thought the best way of contributing something to the nation was to become a politician. So he became a politician. And he said, by becoming a politician and becoming a minister, you could use the abilities and the genius of the home civil service officers for the nation's good. For the nation's good. For he entered politics and made his way up to become the Prime Minister of England. That's what Patel did in India. When Patel became the Deputy Prime Minister and the Union Home Minister, Patel was the man who recognized and acknowledged also the capabilities and the talent that was in the Indian civil service. And he fought against his own colleagues. In fact, Nehru was not an admirer of the Indian civil service. Those of you who have read his autobiography would realize he had an utter contempt for the ICS. I suppose partly because he could have never cracked the ICS himself. He was a kind of John Major. Anyway, it is Patel who recognized the value of the Indian civil service and used them to the hilt, to the fullest, to accomplish some of the great tasks that he had achieved as Deputy Prime Minister and Union Home Minister. But unfortunately, today I can't speak well of our civil services, that includes the Indian Police Service. It's not merely the civil service, but I think that is a subject for another talk, another day. But I thought why I wanted to speak last was give my colleagues the chance to speak what they want and omit whatever they had said and touch upon the other aspects of these coaching institutions. And I think many coaching institutions are doing exceedingly well. I'm not so sure about RAU Study Circle itself, but the greatness about RAU lies in this, that if John Major wanted to utilize the services of the Home Civil Service for the nation's good, RAU having been denied a position in the civil service himself for reasons extraneous to his merit, he thought that he would train people for the civil service examination and produce them by the dozens and the scores, which I think he must have done. And he did yeoman service to this country by setting up the RAU Study Circle. With these words, I thank the organizers of this function for having given me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. May I now request yes. 2 minutes. Sure, sir. Please.
Sabhaku namaskaram. సభకు నమస్కారం. అందరూ స్పీకర్స్ కోచింగ్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్స్ గురించి వీటి గురించి చక్కగా చెప్పారు. ఎస్ రావు ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ అనేది కేవలం సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్లో ఉద్యోగం సంపాదించడానికే ఉపయోగపడలేదు. సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్ వచ్చిన తర్వాత కూడా సమాజానికి ఏ విధంగా సేవ చేయాలి, ఆ సర్వీస్ ద్వారా సమాజాన్ని ఎలా బాగు చేయాలనే తపన గల హానెస్ట్ ఆఫీసర్స్ని ఈ దేశానికి అందించిన మహోన్నత విలువల హిమాలయ శిఖరమని మనవి చేస్తూ చాలామంది ఇప్పుడు గవర్నమెంట్ ఆఫీసెస్కి వెళ్తే అందరూ లేటుగా వచ్చి ఎర్లీగా వెళ్ళిపోతూ ఉంటారు. కానీ ఈ ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ ద్వారా కోచింగ్ తీసుకున్న వాళ్ళు మీరు ఎవరినై మీరు వెళ్ళి చూసుకోవచ్చు. నేను చెప్పింది అతిశయోక్తి కాదు. ఎవరైతే ఆఫీసరు అందరికన్నా ముందు వచ్చి అందరికన్నా లాస్ట్ వెళ్తారో, వాళ్ళ ప్యూన్ కూడా వెళ్ళిపోయిన తర్వాత వెళ్తారో, వాళ్ళందరూ కూడా రావుస్ అనే సిగ్నేచర్ వాళ్ళ ఇదిలో ఉంటుంది. ఆ విధంగా వాళ్ళ ఈ ఉద్యోగంలో వచ్చిన తర్వాత కూడా సమాజానికి ఏ విధంగా సేవ చేయాలి అని వాళ్ళ వ్యక్తిత్వాలని వజ్రాలుగా తీర్చిదిద్దిన మహోన్నత వ్యక్తి ఆయనకి నా నమస్సుమాంజలు హృదయపూర్వకంగా తెలుసు. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ జస్ట్ నాట్ ఫర్ మనీ. హీ హ్యాస్ క్రియేటెడ్ హిజ్ ఓన్ బ్రాండ్. మన్నించాలి.
No, thank you very much, sir. It's nice of you to have come and expressed your opinion. Thank you very much. May I now request Dr. Chandra to felicitate the dignitaries on the dais. Please help him. Please come along. Help Dr. Chandra. Hello. Sorry for the interruption.
I'm a little bit late. I know you're all anxious for the end of this program. Dignitaries on the dais, and all of you have come to participate in today's memorial talk and listen about Dr. Rao. I'm one of his students. I feel very proud to say that. My name is Sandhya Rani. I belong to 1987 batch of Indian Postal Services. I've just retired a year ago. I'm settled back in Hyderabad. I won't allow this opportunity to go away, and I thought, let me share a few of my reflections about Dr. Rao. In fact, my journey has been with the desire to join civil services and to first get into Rao study circle ever since I completed my school final. My uncle earlier was Dr. Rao's student who retired from the police, and several others in the family also, and many of my friends. So it was a natural path for me to join and reach 11 Haley Road, New Delhi, where Dr. Rao's study circle was working. In fact, I'm amazed at the memory, phenomenal memory of Anjaneya Reddy sir in really giving such a perfect pen picture of Dr. Rao. Sir, you have really recalled and presented Dr. Rao's persona so beautifully. I could kind of relate to everything that you were saying about him. And just a couple of things that you missed, I just thought I should tell you. Dr. Rao used to famously say, I take tea, not tilk. I don't know if you remember. So you say, in Indian homes, in Indian offices, they serve you milk with a little bit of tea. And that's why he used to call it tilk. But he used to say, tea has to be drunk like tea. In fact, Vivek Garu, you really touched a raw nerve in my thoughts about writing practices. I used to be an aspirant PhD student when I left Central University, and I used to think I'm pretty good in writing. But it destroyed all my confidence when I joined Rao Study Circle and presented my scripts to Dr. Rao. And I think every few days when he returned the scripts with a lot of red slashes, confidence level used to go to my toes. And I used to think, where am I? Is it really truly the line I want to get into? But he also built and encouraged our confidence and really helped us join the civil services. One thing that really helped in association with Dr. Probably I was one of the first few students when the study circle moved to Hyderabad. And we were a very small group of students who were in the long term. So we spent a lot of time with Dr. Rao. It was really a privilege to see the personal side of him as well as to interact with some of his family members, Hema Auntie and others. But more than that, what Dr. Rao taught us probably lasted all through my life and my career, and it really shaped, it reinforced my own values of wanting to make impact with my work, and I hope I did in some respects. In fact, in his writing, in his corrections of our writing scripts, he actually taught us to look at the world objectively in what Sir was saying about being matured. Looking at it in a balanced manner and taking a step back. That means examining our own prejudices and to be able to look at life in a much more stark manner. Not only life, in relationships, people, in so many other ways. In fact, Dr. Rao has influenced generations of officers, really. But surprisingly, he never ever dropped a name in any of our classes. This was we joined almost 20, 25 years after he started the study circle. Definitely, I'm sure many of his own mentees have become secretaries and senior officers, but I do not recall in those 2 years or 2.5 years I was with the study circle, he ever mentioning or dropping a name saying, I know so-and-so secretary. So-and-so secretary I taught or I coached or I mentored. He was not really enamored by power or pelf in that sense. But we all knew that he was secretly very, very proud about each of his students and the kind of work they were doing. So sometimes, occasionally, he used to give an example of, see that officer in rural development? That's the kind of work you should do. Or see so-and-so in health ministry? That's the kind of work you must do. So it really taught us, it really reinforced our own aspirations to join the civil services and make a difference. And I think that is what I always carried. Strangely, as I think T.S. Eliot, the poet, was saying, after eons of journeying, we'll come back to where we started. I stay now 5 minutes away from Dr. Rao's study circle. And almost every time I pass that, and I keep thinking, this is where my journey started. And I'm really very grateful for the wonderful time and for the association with Dr. Rao and for what he taught us and what he showed us in that sense. And I'm always grateful for the friends I made and for the values that I learned from Dr. Rao. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I'm sorry that I've held up the next program to kind of come in. I was too tempted to share my thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. You have only enhanced our hunger. Thank you very much. May I now request Shri P.S. Ramohan Rao Garu to accept a small little felicitation from the Sankuratri Foundation, please. Oh, okay, sir. Fine. Yeah. Now, Shri Anjaney Reddy garu, please. Sir. Now, Krishna garu, please. కూర్చోండి. And thank you very much. Before we get to the last item of the program, the national anthem, Puja Shri will sing a small little poem and make us all happy and ask us to be very peaceful in life. Correct, Puja? Okay. Go ahead. Sing.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you very much. Wonderful, wonderful. The last item, we will all stand up for Jana Gana Mana, sing it ourselves. Before.
Please announce dinner.
Please have your dinner and go. Please. Don't disappoint us, sir. Please. Amma? missed one of my vote of thanks. Hello.
Please come up to the stage and offer flowers to Dr. Rao and have your dinner and be a part of. Come up. We all got carried away so much that we forgot that there's a formal vote of thanks. Apologies for that, but a deep felt gratitude from all of us to all.